public has a right to know.
There's a tremendous resistance. I guarantee every one of them knows that this event happened.
I'm Ron James, and we're here at a little studio I set up in Sedona, Arizona, because I'm laying low from Los Angeles for a while. Coming up shortly is going to be the release of the movie The Phenomenon. Now, I don't know when you're going to be seeing this video because we're talking about the timing for putting it out, but I'm lucky enough to have James Fox right here in Sedona in my little studio I built here just for this interview. And James, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on. It's an exciting time.
It really is an exciting time. You know, congratulations on the film. You and I have been in the same orbit for a really long time, doing a lot of the same kind of work. And I just think that what you've done and the timing of it couldn't be better for the field and for everybody that wants to know more about the topic. And so you've created this film that really brings people up to speed, and you've gotten some really good distribution traction, and the timing couldn't be better.
You know, I kept thinking, because we were scheduled to get a theatrical release all across the country, which has been a lifelong dream of mine,
Well, I guess the timing could be better because of that.
Ultimately, for The Phenomenon, I think it'll end up being a boon for us. And the reason I say that is because we had that window. Like, we finished the film pretty much. I mean, we made some updates to it last month, but we basically finished the film in January. The film could have come out in January, right, of 2020. But then, of course, the pandemic hit, everything froze. There was a whole stay-at-home order, and everyone was like, release your movie, release it now, release it now. But we were holding out for a quick solution to this pandemic and thinking, like, we still want our theatrical.
Yes.
But, I was hoping that it was going to, we were going to get rid of this pandemic and we could get our theatrical, but that didn't happen. So we sat on the film for like months and months and months, right? 6 months where it could have been out. Well, meanwhile, during that 6-month window, all the content that had been finished had been gone through for the most part. So there was a dearth of fresh content. Suddenly, you're getting all these platforms that normally want to hoard it to themselves are having to share it.
Right.
What that means is that it's going to be seen by more people in the end because we'll get all the platforms. Yes, we might miss our theatrical for the time being, but we'll get all these other platforms make up for it. We'll end up getting a lot more eyeballs on the film than we would have with what our previous distribution plan was.
Now, do you think that that's how it's panning out? Do you feel happy about the ultimate outcome for the distribution of the film? Because I know missing theatrical is a big deal, because this was the first film since Chariots of the Gods, which for me was a life-changing film. It's the first film that was slated to have that kind of wide mainstream release.
I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. And I remember I lost my dad a few years ago, and my dad had this saying to me. He said, son, always remember in life to play the game on the board, not the one in your head. And that came through to me with the film. It's like, you know what? I got to play the game on the board. And the game on the board right now is theatrical's not happening. So I got to make the best of a shitty situation. And we had some mistakes made under the cloud of COVID with my distributor. And I'm not going to, name names or anything like that, but we're making the best of the situation, and it's going to get out on a multitude of platforms now over several years.
Before we go further, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the nuts and bolts of all that without, starting any fires, but, I think that it serves as lessons learned for other filmmakers that are trying to get their stuff distributed, and some of the things to watch out for and some of the things to embrace. But first, if it's all right with you, let's roll the trailer.
Great.
I knew this was breaking news for the front page of the New York Times.
My gosh. Look at that thing.
We need to accept that we are not alone in the universe.
The federal government all these years has covered up everything. It's very, very bad for our country.
There have been visitation, crashed craft, material recovered.
It was not anything from this earth. All I could do is keep a mouth shut.
The public has a right to know.
There's a tremendous resistance. I guarantee every one of them knows that this event happened.
Hiding these dark secrets even from elected presidents.
They came running up here in such a panic. Child can't make that up. Declassified government documents confirm ongoing UFO incursions at nuclear weapons sites.
Are you saying that there's some evidence that still hasn't seen the light of day?
I'm saying most of it hasn't seen the light of day.
These things are real, they're here, this is happening now.
So again, there's so many synchronicities that came with this film. A lot of it, the fact that while you were actually in production of it, the whole stuff with the UFO Tic Tacs came out and actually enabled you to carry the film's release with very current modern stuff that is paradigm changing.
It's funny, you know, having researched the phenomenon for a couple of decades now and made my fourth film, or my fourth and a half film on the topic, I've kind of learned that, you know, these productions take a long time. The shortest turnaround I ever had was 4.5 years for I Know What I Saw. Mostly, like, out of the blue was 5 years, and I put a couple more years into it, about 7.5 years. So I knew this was going to be a long haul, and I was saying in production, in the midst of production, because people were saying, well, how are you going to end it? What's it going to... I said, well, I'm going to build the history, you know, and well, how are you going to end it? I said, you know, probably something's going to happen in the next couple of years during production, and, you know, maybe a good sighting. These things ebb and flow, and I'm sure that something big will break. I had no idea that it was going to be as big as it was. I mean, the front page of the New York Times, ATIP, Secret Pentagon UFO Program. Boy, that was huge news for us because we were in the midst of production. Obviously, it added another year or two, actually 2.5 years, really, because we went after all the key players, you know. Who had any idea that this program was going on since 2007, you know? Like, during the whole Obama administration and the first year of the Trump administration, this secret Pentagon UFO program was happening. And these massive sightings off the coast of the East Coast and off the coast of San Diego, I mean, this stuff was happening. None of us in the UFO community, or very few people in the UFO community, didn't know about, you know? And so it was a huge boon. And it was like a stamp of legitimacy, a UFO, you know, headline in the New York Times. Stanton Friedman talked to me about, well, one of these days, there's going to be a publication in the New York Times on the UFOs. In other words, there's going to be a stamp of legitimacy on the UFO phenomenon at some point in the future, and that happened.
And so that happening actually enabled you to shape your film for the day. It could have been something that came out at any time and, you know, gave a synopsis of the history of the thing and was useful to the vernacular. But it from what I understand, from what I see in the synchronicities that made it happen, it enabled the creation of a film that is going to be a landmark point in the history of this phenomenon unfolding. When they talk about it 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 1,000 years from now, the phenomenon film will be one of those things that they talk about that exposed and brought to light a turning point in the whole process of mankind's evolving knowledge.
We just lucked out. I mean, you know, quite honestly, I mean, I didn't realize all the...
I could have just said it like that.
Well, no, I think we kind of lucked out, and it was like, you know, shocking, quite honestly, that it happened and that it kind of continues to happen. I mean, look, I had people that were so skeptical of what I've been doing, family members, you know, different parts of the world. For years, they've been saying, you know, first, like, you've lost your mind, you're going down a dead-end road, what are you doing wasting your life? And then it was like the first one came out, the second one came out. It's like, oh, maybe there's something to it, mildly interested. You know, I Know What I Saw. I did the National Press Club event with Leslie Kean. And it was like, it kind of piqued some interest. Well, I had people after that New York Times article was published from all around saying, oh my God, you were right. They weren't questioning the legitimacy of the program and the existence of the phenomenon anymore. They were like, sheesh. And I thought, I knew the impact that was having because I have gotten so much crap from these people over the decades that for them to turn around, the impact that it made on them, I knew it was big.
It was a windfall of vindication for a lot of people that, you know, being in a subject that's largely ridiculed and finally getting some recognition in the mainstream vernacular through official channels, official sources, and it's only the tip of the iceberg, but it changed everything for a lot of people that were doing this work. It changed it for me, it changed it for you, and it's given legitimacy to a lot of people that have really been dedicated to this cause for so long without that. And so, yeah, it really, really came in and reshaped things a lot.
I dedicated the film to Stanton Friedman. Did you notice that?
Yes, yes. You know, Stan was one of those guys that...
I cried like a baby when I found out he died.
Yeah, I still remember exactly where I was sitting. And Sky and I were in Florida at a place that I used to visit all the time. And I can't remember who told me. It was either Steve Bassett or Kathleen Martin. But I was just so, it just felt like the air just left the room. Because Stan, from the very early days, he was the scientist guy that was coming on TV talking about this. He wasn't the guy with the tinfoil hat. He wasn't the guy with the far out stories. He was the guy that said, you know, I'm a scientist, and there's something to this. And then he was so instrumental in breaking Roswell. This is something that I don't think he ever quite got all the credit he deserved for doing that. But the fact is that he was that sane voice, and in the early days, it shaped me.
4 people that were highly influential to my decision-making process with the phenomenon. Edgar Mitchell, Dr. Jalen Hynek, Jacques Vallée, and Stanton Friedman.
They stand today as people that really stood up. You know, when I first talked to Dr. Mitchell about what happened, and one of the things I really wanted to get from him is, but how did it feel? You know, how did it feel when you were on the moon after all that training? What emotions did you experience? And then coming back, when you had that spiritual experience, you know, what was that really, really like? And what I found that was really interesting is it was really hard for him to scratch too deep below the surface on that stuff. He could say, well, it felt amazing. Well, I trained for this for years. It felt wonderful. I had a life-changing spiritual epiphany coming back from the moon. That was very interesting. And that kind of harkened me back to, this is your astronaut training. This is your media training that we're seeing glimpses of in the way you experience this and the way you convey it. And so Edgar's story and the fact that he really embraced the field and wanting to find the truth, there's a whole film there yet to be made.
Let me tell you my first meeting with him at his house in Florida. And it was a monumental moment for me, as you can imagine. He'd done some work with me in a previous film, but only over the telephone. This time I invited to go to his house, met with him. And he said, and I was just overwhelmed with joy, as you can imagine. He said, James, what would you like me to wear for the interview? And before I had a moment to censor myself, out it came, how about a pink nightie? And I literally said to myself, oh my God, I can't believe I just ruined this interview. He's going to kick me out of the house. And I can't believe I just said that. What was I just said? This is the man, 6th man to walk on the moon, you know, MIT grad, like, you know. And he burst out with laughter. And he had a really great sense of humor, you know, and he's just, ha, 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 ha. It really kind of broke the ice, you know. And then we're in the middle of the interview, and I said, God, I hate to ask this of you, but I gotta know, what was it like to walk on the moon? Would you mind taking a moment? And when I want to, like, fully absorb what someone's saying, and I'll do this with witnesses. I did it with Travis Walton. I've done it with a number of witnesses. I actually close my eyes and I get their words to create the imagery in my head. And I did that with Edgar Mitchell. So I can honestly tell you, I really kind of do know what it's like to land on the moon, because Edgar Mitchell told me every fine detail of it, and looking back at Earth and hearing the macrometeorites pelting the skin of the spacecraft as he sat on the lunar surface, looking back at Earth and putting his hand up and blocking out the Earth as it was rising. Everything he knew, fascinating. He was a fascinating man, and I was such an honor to have met him and to have worked with him in the short time that I did. Yeah, and like I said, there's a handful of people that were highly influential that led to this film, and he's one of them. I would call Edgar Mitchell, and he'd pick up the phone and talk with me, call me back.
Yeah.
You know, and I would ask him advice. I would ask him for guidance on things. He was so sweet, and he would say, "It's really good to see you, James." Like when I got together with him in 2012 or 2013 in Florida, And he was sincere. And like, good to see you, James. Like, how have you been? And what are you up to? He really cared, and he was so loving and compassionate and so intelligent, and just the way he saw life, and he was such an inspiration to me. I'm indebted to him forever. I am who I am because of Edgar Mitchell and a handful of people that have been influential to me, and really striving for good, really striving for accuracy and integrity in productions. And people say, like, why does it take so long for you to make a movie? I'm like, I can't make a movie any faster than I do. It's a minimum of 4.5 years for me, to do it the way I want to do it. And this one was 7.5 years. It just, I don't write the narrative before. I gather the interviews and then stitch them together, right?
It's a very organic thing that happened.
It's a long process, It's actually much easier to do something that's scripted, because you write the script and then you fill in the blanks, and just you could pass it over to an editor and pop it together. You only have so many films in you in a lifetime. This last one really took the wind out of my sails. I mean, it was like, seriously, you're in the ring with a monster and you're just trying to survive the next round. And that's what it felt like for 7.5 years.
Talk about that a little bit. I know that every film for you has been like a difficult birth. I've heard the stories about how I Know What I Saw, how difficult that was. And is there a pattern that you see in the process of making a film that turns it into just this emotional journey that takes everything out of you that it can before you finally get it to the point where it's done?
Making a good documentary is really, really hard and really challenging. And it takes tenacity and steadfast focus, and I literally would say to myself, if this was easy, it would have been done already. If this was easy, it would have been done already. I can do this, I can do this. And every night you think, fuck, man, can I do this? Am I gonna be able to pull this off? There are all these expectations. People, it's a level, it's so hard. It's literally, when I say I'm in the ring with a monster, I mean it. I'm in the ring with a monster who's gonna kill me, and I'm just trying to survive the next round, and I really mean that. It's that hard for me, to produce something that you're really proud of. I mean, the birthing process for this film, I don't ever want to go through that again, ever.
And you've told me that out of all the films that you've made, and I totally share your sentiment that they're never as good as you really wanted them to be. There's always budget, there's time, there's just inability to get it, what you see in your head, and translate it to something other people can see. But you said that this film is that film for you, the one that actually worked. Tell us about how that feels.
When I looked at Out of the Blue, I was unsatisfied. I went back to the drawing board. I had to buy out my 2 other partners because they were like, what are you doing? This film's done. I know what I saw. I failed with I Know What I Saw. I remember looking at the deal that could have been with Lionsgate and what that would have represented for the UFO community, for all of us. Not just, like I was saying, the financial benefits, but the distribution platform for a global company like that would have been amazing. It would have been unprecedented. And I failed there. And I remember when I sold it to A&E, for what seemed like a lot of money at the time, I was totally unsatisfied. And my dad was like, what's wrong, son? I was really depressed. He goes, you just finished a movie and you sold the damn thing. What's the problem? I'm like, I didn't do it. This isn't what I set out to do. I feel like I fell short of the mark. Now with this film, when I say, is there room for improvement? Damn right there is. I mean, look, I got down to the last year of production, and I knew it was one or the other in terms of budget. Like I was running out of time. People were impatient. My family was like, you've been working on this film for over, I was coming up on 7 years. What the hell? Like, let's get this thing done here. We're gonna start generating some money. But long story short, it came down to 2 choices I had. One was upgrade the graphics, or 2, the audio. And I opted for the audio. So I took out a loan and I invested a significant amount of money with a sound engineer, an 8-time Emmy Award-winning sound engineer in Los Angeles. And that made a massive, massive difference. Would I have liked to have upgraded some of the graphics? I would have. But for the most part, in fact, I'm very satisfied with the film.
So many years of being like a self-taught guy, being a one-man band in production, what was it like to actually have the resources to really hire the right people and the right crew? And was it kind of a learning curve just being at that level all of a sudden, or did you just ease right into it?
Well, in most respects, it was great to have a budget where you could, I want to go to Africa. I want to rent a plane, you know? I mean, it wasn't like I just had funny money. I had to be mindful. I never flew, you know, I flew the cheapest possible economy class. I stayed in Airbnbs because that would save money for hotels, so I could spend money on paying the crew. So we would all share an Airbnb. Like, for instance, I pay $100 a night or $200 for a night in lieu of spending, you know, $800 a night, so everyone could have their own room at a hotel, you know? So I was mindful in that regard. I would buy food at stores, we'd cook in, like, we'd go out, of course, too, but that meant that I had more money on paying for a really proper cameraman, paying for a professional audio and lighting, so I could focus on the interview. I don't have to, like, you know what it's like when you're trying to do an interview and you're doing the lighting, you're doing the camera, and you're doing the audio, and, like, you know, you're, like, worried that the camera battery is getting low, or, you know, my batteries for my wireless mic are out. I'm not monitoring my audio. I mean, you know, all those things.
And like all of those things are happening right now, just so y'all know.
Yeah, and so you can actually focus on the interview, which is what matters at the end of the day, right? It was still very hard, obviously, to make the film. It's great having a budget, but you set your standards even higher, right? So those expectations. So I was still in, for me, I was still in sort of uncharted territory, you know, where I was taking on bigger responsibilities. I was bringing in, managing more people. That was good in a lot of respects, but it's also trying to find the right people. Sometimes that's very difficult. Money can't buy that. I mean, you know, it's like the writer I ended up getting, this guy Mark Barish. You know, I worked with a lot of writers before that, a lot of people that were good, but not at the level of Mark Barish. Mark Barish was like a lot better than me, and he really helped stitch the scenes together and create a very strong narrative. I mean, we had it out in the studio many times on what scene goes where, and I'd put my foot down and he'd put his foot down, and, you know, every single word was carefully crafted in that film. There was not one word out of place that we didn't spend 20 minutes talking about one word of the narration and how the scenes were going to be stitched together and what goes where and all that stuff. I mean, it was like we crafted that thing very slowly, put it together, and then we'd put something together, we'd step away from it for a little while, and then we'd tear it apart and put it back together again. And then we'd step away from it for a couple of months, and we'd tear it apart and put it back together again. I remember at one point, we must have spent a year on UFOs and nukes, which is what, 7 minutes, 8 minutes? That we sifted through about 20 hours of material for 8 minutes. We tore that and put it back together again so many times. I almost cried the last time we did it, because I was like, I'm never going to put this back together again. It was like, just like a jigsaw puzzle just scattered all over the floor, you know, and like we're bickering over one little statement, like, no, this has got to go here, and now it's got to go there, and you're thinking, I got to put this back together again. Why do I keep taking it apart? It was fine. You know what I mean? I mean,
that's the process, though.
Yeah, and you know, the Rua at the end. I mean, I had like 3 editors working with me on that, and they were like, threw their hands in the air, like, I can't do this. This is way too complicated. You can't take 100 hours and whittle it down to 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Like, you know, it's a process. Yeah. It's a painstaking process, and to do it right takes time. Period. I don't care how much money you have.
Well, that's why entire rooms of people in Hollywood with executives that think they know the entire industry can still put out a dud. You know, if it was easy to do, then everything that got created would be really good. And everything that gets created, even by the best of the best, supposedly, is not always really good. In fact, a lot of times it's not.
We had a screening, a rough cut of the film, about 120 people in the audience at a private theater. Oh, well, we rented a theater for it. Some guy did it for us. And I could see people 3/4 of the way into the movie, you know, kind of fidgeting with their watches, looking down to see if their shoes are tied, getting up, going to the bathroom. And I was like, this is not a good sign. And I had to go back and do what my partner and I talked about at the time of killing your darlings.
Right.
The scenes that you're emotionally attached to, the scenes that you know what it took to get that person on camera, what it took to put those sections together, and how important they were to me or to him. And we had to like cut them and just execution style, just you're out. And we cut 30 minutes out of the film. 30 minutes.
And that was in late stage after...
Yeah, it was in late stage. But I knew we had to do it. We had to do it. And we jokingly called it Killing Our Darlings. And we did it. We were brutal about it. And we got it down to 92 minutes, 93 minutes. And some of the material that didn't make it up in the actual film, we were like, you know what? Let's push that aside and see if we can sandwich it in the credits. So we have a little bit of credits, some of the content that didn't make it in the movie.
I thought some of the best stuff was during the credit rolls.
Yeah. But you know, you can't get it all in a movie. You just can't.
Right.
You know, like I was telling you earlier, I went to Virginia, Brazil 4 times. Not 1 second. That's the Roswell of Brazil, Virginia, 1996. Not 1 second of that case made it in the movie. In fact, I haven't even told the people in Brazil yet. They're going to be devastated when they find out that they didn't make it in the movie. None of it did. It will. I will make that movie. It'll just be for another time.
Now, you were talking about the writing, but another thing that was really striking about the film is Peter Coyote's narration. And you'd worked with him in the past, hadn't you?
Well, the first time I managed to get him to work with me, I showed up and he goes, this is right out of the blue. He goes, oh, you're not the guy I thought. You're a different guy. No, I thought I knew you. No, you're not the guy. And I was like, well, we've been talking back. Oh, I thought you were someone else. And he kind of looks at me, and I'm like, oh my God, this guy's gonna pull out. And then he kind of looks at me, and I had this look on my face, like devastation, you know. And he's like, I'll do it for you. I'll do it for you, but you're not the guy that I thought you were. You're somebody else. I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else. He's really nice. Actually, I bought a check to pay for it, which I borrowed the money from my next door neighbor for $5,000, which was like $1 million to me at the time. I mean, I was penniless, and I handed him the check like, oh, like this is so much money, right? It's like, I had the check, and he looked at the check, and he goes, rips it in half. He goes, save it for other parts of the production or something, and he did it, and he did a fantastic job, but. He's associated himself with UFOs in the 90s. Actually, it's probably 2000 at that point, but still, he was like a mainstream, narrator, really respected and with high regard, and he just put his name on a UFO doc. That's not easy to do, right? And then I got him to do it again for the second version of Out of the Blue. Then he did the narration for a film I did in the BP oil spill called Pretty Slick.
I think I saw that. Yeah, I remember when you made it and put it out.
Yeah, and then I did, The Phenomenon, and I approached him, and I actually had some high, some people were like, oh, you need to get this person. I said, no, man, Peter Coyote's been really good to me, and I want him to narrate this movie, and he's good. And I got him in, and he was loving the film and loving the script and loving, it was really, really fun to see him again and to be in the studio with him again. He'd moved. We'd done stuff in Sausalito. He was up in a different part of California at the time. And it was just, he's such a professional. He's so good at what he does. Yeah, it's an honor, quite honestly.
What do you hope that the audience takes away from this film? And to expand on that even further, do you think that the fact that there's so much mainstream attention to the topic and it's unfolding so quickly is going to really contribute to a broader audience takeaway? Not so much the material, but just the atmosphere that we're in now.
This film is hitting at exactly the right moment. There couldn't be a better time for this movie to come out, because not just you have the New York Times article from 2017 and the fact that the mainstream media has been, covering this topic without that silly grin on their face. But also you've had this paradigm shift pandemic that's really caused people to, reflect on ourselves as a species, as a race, as, you know what I mean? Like, people have been confined to their quarters. Life as usual has come to a grinding halt. And there's been some big revelations and big coming to terms with so many things. I think the timing's perfect. I really do. I can't think of a better time. Can you?
No, I think it's absolutely perfect. And you know, the thing that I always wonder is the understanding that we're not alone in whatever way that looks, however it turns out to be, probably a lot of different ways that we're not alone. But as that gets infused into the vernacular in a broader way so that people are kind of accepting that knowledge, is it going to be very instrumental in positive changes for how humanity guides itself moving forward?
I can't see why not. I mean, it's just the bigger picture, you know, how we fit in a much larger reality. I think, and I've always felt this way, it would have a unifying effect on humanity. Right. To have the perspective of stop looking at ourselves as black, white, yellow, green, Asian, African, whatever, as we'd look at ourselves as who we really are. And that's one race, one people, sharing this beautiful little planet, hurling through the vastness of space. And I
kind of like what Reagan said at the UN.
Yeah, I honestly believe that. I really do. And you know, you step back, I mean, that was the revelation that Edgar Mitchell talked about when he looked back at the Earth and he saw this little blue marble suspended in the vacuum of space. And everything he knew, every culture, every being, every bit of history, all there. This one little blue marble suspended in the vacuum of this darkness. And that's who we are. We're one race and one species. And I think that we need to remember that.
I think that all of the people that are involved in this field, that have been dedicated to it, that have been dragged through the mud and given up, you know, a lot of prosperity, almost everybody that's a famous investigator could have had different options in their life that would have left them with a lot more materially by the time they were done. And the reason these people do it, and the reason I do it, and probably the reason you do it too, is because this is the most important question facing humanity. There's maybe three: life after death, the ET question, and the very nature of our reality, and how they all three tie together. And I've always felt like if I'm going to be here and I'm going to be creating media, these are the things I want to do. These are the topics I want to cover, because I just can't think of anything more important. And I don't want to do stuff for money or to get rich. And so people don't understand that people that dedicate themselves to these fields are doing it for the very specific reason of helping to forward human understanding.
I've had people over the years many times say, why is it that you do what you do? People think of it as like chasing a UFO. And I stop and I say, let me ask you a question. If Earth was being visited, if there was evidence being withheld from humanity, I'm not saying that it is or it isn't, but if, hypothetically, if it was, how significant of a story would you give that? And everybody says, oh, it's got to be the most significant discovery of our time, the most important story ever. And I say, well, I'm convinced that's happening. So that's why I do what I do.
It's amazing that the general public really doesn't, they think that the work that we do, we owe to the world. And it's what's happened in filmmaking, just since YouTube came out, has been just a paradigm shifting impact on independent film. So like when I was first doing this, I was making all these DVDs and I was distributing them all over the place, and it was great. And then all of a sudden, here's YouTube. All of a sudden now the work that you're doing is completely devalued, and the public actually expects that now you actually owe it. You make it, you owe it. We don't have to pay you. And so to get through that time period where everything really changed for people out there making content and being independent and non-mainstream, it really made you reaffirm your commitment to what you're doing and why you're doing it. Did you experience that shift, and did it affect you directly?
I remember there were times where I was so broke I couldn't even afford to pay attention in making these things. And I remember one specific time, my mother had just died. My girlfriend had left me. She's like, all you care about is this stupid UFO movie that you're making, like, you know, what the hell's wrong with you? And I remember I'd sold everything I'd owned to finish the movie. I put it all on the line. I was at the poker table pushing all in on one bet. And that reality struck me. It was like I'd never thought of it that way. I'd never thought of the risks that were involved in going for it. But it did for a moment, for a brief moment, and it was terrifying. Like, oh my God, what happens if I fail? I'm completely penniless. I can't afford my rent. Like, what am I? Jesus, I really risked it all on this one bet. Like, what was I thinking? And then I sort of got a hold of myself. It's like, just calm down. You know, I actually went to sleep on the couch that night. I didn't even have a bed at the time. And I woke up the next morning and it's like, you know, put your boots on, soldier, get back to work and let's make this thing happen, you know? But it can be very scary.
How do you think that the shift in media and how it's consumed and the free model or the YouTube model and all these different things that are basically, when I used to sell a DVD, I'd wholesale it for $9. So I got $10 every time somebody watched my DVD.
I read a comment today and the guy said, I'm gonna wait till this is free. And I just thought, okay, well, if you're penniless, that's fair enough. But if you have the money and you're just expecting it for free, do you have any idea like what I've been through to make this content, to put this together for you guys? Like, you have no idea. And if you can afford to contribute, please. But if you can't, fair enough. I didn't do it to become a millionaire. It's not why I do this, you know? But it's like, if you can contribute to it, you know, you can't just expect things for free. And people give their heart and soul to produce this content, you know, myself included. Like, I put it all on the line and I've got a family, you know, and sometimes it's terrifying, you know, it's really risky. The odds of failure are so high, you know, and I just remember saying failure is not an option, but, you know, in the back of your mind, it's scary.
So it really does need to change, because if a filmmaker can't afford to make his next film off what he got paid for his last film, then there's not going to be a next film, or it's going to be bad, or or the sacrifices are too high. And so I think that what's happening in media, I ask all my independent filmmaker friends, it's like, what can we do to change public perception to the point where people really do understand that this work has to be funded? I've never seen a field or a line of work where you're actually expected to give it away. Nobody goes to their job and works for free. And so why is this culture that's created this way, and what can we do to turn it around?
You know, people also complain on YouTube watching commercials. And it's like, okay, you're not paying for anything. You got to sit through a couple commercials, but it's free. And those commercials provide revenue for us filmmakers, people that are creating this content for your entertainment. Like, and you know, these guys don't want to sit through some commercials.
Yeah, I know. That's like, how much
I'm sorry to subject you to a couple commercials. Like, really? Like, you're watching it for free, you know? What was that expression? I saw a film on Netflix not too long ago called The Social Dilemma.
Yeah, I just watched that a couple nights ago.
They said, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product.
Yeah. That's powerful. What did you think of that film?
Oh, that was amazing. I mean, it's like, you kind of know that that's what's going on, but then to hear it, you know, and look, man, I'm a sucker too. I get sucked into social media platforms and all that, but it's a little scary because you see what it's ripping this country. It's ripping us apart.
Actually, what will not enable you to reshape your opinions are just plain scary. And I don't think anybody that started the social media thing, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg set out to make something like that. And you're right. Right now, it's like if you have a certain view, this system is not going to expose you to other views, and it's just going to get crazier and crazier and polarize people more and more.
Once the genie's out of the bottle, can't get her back in. Yeah,
it's really scary. The whole ET thing, the whole way that we are coming to understand ourselves against all the other things that are happening to our society, it's a really interesting time. I think if human beings incarnate to come to this planet, I think that the 21st century, at this current time, is probably the best show on the menu, because the way things are unfolding and the way we're actually getting to contribute to it, you, me, all the other people that are out there doing work that other people are paying attention to on whatever scale that is, we all have a hand and a part. And that's like a very big cosmic honor to be able to do that, to be able to say, you know, I'm going to get up this morning, I'm going to do something to make the world a better place. Yeah. And to actually have the tools and the ability in the audience to do that. And that's what people don't understand, I think, a lot, is in what motivates the small independent filmmakers that are out there doing the things that matter to them on a gut level. And so, you know, congratulations on the phenomenon. I hope it goes as far as it can go. It's going to be a big thing as far as how it helps people to really get up to speed. And, you know, as an independent filmmaker, you just really hit your stride. I can't wait to see what you do next.
Well, thank you. You know, I set out 26 years ago to create a body of evidence that could be presented to mainstream and digestible to mainstream that transcends the UFO community. And I think we finally did it.
Yeah, I think it's a great film, and just congratulations all the way across the board. And thanks for being one of the first interviews pre-release.
Yeah, this is actually my first interview. The film's done, so yeah.